What if I told you that most of who you think you are isn't actually you? It's a survival system, a set of adaptations built from trauma that you barely even remember or you didn't even notice. And the way that you react or overthink or people please or self sabotage, that's not failure. It's patterns that your body and your nervous system learned to protect you. So today I want to talk about the hidden cost of adaptation and why understanding this is the first step towards real freedom. So most people think that trauma is something that happened, a big, obvious event that you can point to. But here's the thing, trauma is the imprint that event had on your nervous system. It's the body and the brain learning that certain situations were unsafe and then carrying that learning forward into your adulthood long after that event is over. It can be small, repeated events like your parents' sigh, a teacher's eye roll, a culture that rewards perfection. All of these things train your nervous system to act as though danger is present. And it still lives in your system decades later because your body's memory will precede your mind every single time. Your posture, your breathing, your subtle reactions, they all hold the history of these experiences. A child who is criticized for asking questions, they might develop a habit of shrinking or speaking softly or not communicating their needs. And then as an adult, that same person might not speak up in meetings, self-edit when they do speak, or avoid asking for what they need, not because the present situation is unsafe, but because they're responding from the patterns of their past. So what most people don't know is even events that might seem small, when they're repeated over time, it can create the same kind of nervous system imprint as those bigger experiences. Trauma is cumulative. It's the accumulation of small experiences and messages and cues that taught you that being yourself was unsafe. And this is where it gets fascinating because your identity, the person that you believe you are, your nervous system learned what it needed to keep you safe, and then your mind created a story to make sense of it. So then over time, these survival patterns like people pleasing, emotional suppression, or hypervigilance, they become who you think you are. And this is why change feels so hard because your concept of self is literally wired to protect what it's always known. Your nervous system is brilliant at survival. It learns what works to keep you safe, and then your mind constructs a story to make sense of it. But over time, these survival strategies become a version of yourself that you identify with, even though they were never meant to define you. So for example, if you learned early that expressing anger led to rejection, then you might suppress your voice, or you don't assert yourself, or you don't ask for what you need, but then you convince yourself that you're quiet or that you're easygoing and laid back. But that calm exterior is actually a protective adaptation. If vulnerability felt unsafe, you might overcompensate with perfectionism, overachievement, or maybe even control. And then you call yourself disciplined or responsible. The drive isn't ambition, it is a learned survival response. I grew up learning that my emotions were too much. I was called a crybaby and too sensitive. Into my adulthood, I noticed that I would avoid conflict. I would censor my words and my emotions. And I was very careful about how much of myself I showed to other people. But I would tell myself that I'm just a private person. None of these things were a conscious choice. They were adaptations masquerading as identity. And here's the thing, these false selves feel so familiar. They're comforting and they're normal because that is how you have been operating your whole life. But the problem is that they limit your life and they limit your relationships. You're not showing your full self. You're not showing your creative potential or your authentic emotional range because your body is still operating from survival mode. True transformation requires disentangling your identity from all of these survival adaptations so that you can reclaim your natural responses, your natural emotions, and your natural way of being. Trauma isn't always personal. It can be intergenerational as well. Your families will pass down stress responses and belief systems and coping strategies. And then you unconsciously absorb all of them. So even if you grew up in a safe home, you might notice that you have these subtle patterns that don't even feel like they're yours. So for example, a lot of women inherit a belief that their voice isn't welcome. Maybe your great grandmother grew up in a time in a culture where women were expected to be quiet, and then your mother unconsciously absorbed that energy. So now you might be hesitant to speak up in meetings, to express disagreement in your relationships, even though nobody is actively silencing you. Anxiety and hypervigilance can be passed down through nervous system imprinting. So if your parents or your grandparents grew up with constant stress, fear of scarcity, or social judgment, their bodies learned survival patterns. So you might notice yourself over checking, over preparing, feeling tension, even in safe situations, and then you wonder why. Well, it's because it's inherited. Perfectionism, people pleasing, fear of intimacy, all of these things can be inherited. They can often feel like personal shortcomings, but they're often strategies that your ancestor learned to adapt to feeling under pressure. And now it's running through you. Most people realize that some of their triggers have nothing to do with their own life and everything to do with unresolved adaptations passed down by generations. So healing is not just about addressing your own personal story, it's about dismantling all of those inherited survival strategies so that you can reclaim your authentic responses, your authentic emotions, your freedom to feel and speak and act as you. Your false self doesn't exist in isolation. It is often interacting with the world around you. So all of the ways that you learn to protect yourself, the people pleasing, the hypervigilance, the emotional suppression, it shapes how you behave in your relationships at work and even with strangers. So for example, if you have a deep fear of rejection, you might constantly scan your partner, their moods, their words, their responses to see if they are going to leave you. You might over apologize or over give or avoid expressing your own needs. All of these behaviors are to keep you safe to avoid loss. But other people respond to these behaviors. So your partner might feel pressured or confused and then slowly pull back. That response then confirms your story. I'm not enough, or I have to shrink to be safe. All of this creates a feedback loop that feels inescapable. Your fear drives your behavior. That behavior shapes other people's responses. And those responses reinforce your false self and your false identity. But the deeper insight here is that having this logic alone, it won't break the loop. You can know that your partner isn't going anywhere, but still have the same nervous system response because your nervous system will react based on decades of adaptation. So here is the paradox. We don't fix trauma by fighting with our old self. Trying to will yourself into a new identity often backfires because force and willpower will trigger the very same survival responses your nervous system is wired to protect you with. Instead, transformation happens through presence and awareness and intentional embodiment, all of which will gradually retrain your nervous system. Step 1, notice the pattern in your body first. Pay attention to where it lives, the tightness in your chest, the twist in your gut. Our body will respond before our mind even catches up. So when your partner gives you constructive feedback and your chest tightens or your gut clenches or your voice begins to rise, that happens long before you even think, I am upset. That is your nervous system responding to past adaptations. Step 2, breathe into it. Acknowledge the experience without judgment. So instead of pushing it away or labeling it as bad, allow yourself to be fully present with it. So notice the tightness in your shoulders or your shallow breath. Simply say to yourself, I feel that there is tension here, and that is okay. Number 3, imagine and embody your new self. So don't think of nervous system regulation as a future goal. Feel it here, feel it now in your posture, in your energy, and in your presence. When you notice that fear of rejection, practice standing with an open chest. Practice slow and intentional breathing. Even if that old voice rises to the surface, even if that old voice in your head protests, all of these things signal safety to your nervous system, and you can start to begin to rewire those patterns. These subtle, consistent changes like pausing, before you react, deep intentional breathing, expressing your needs safely, shifting your posture, and allowing your emotions to flow. They retrain your mind and your body and your energy, slowly dissolving all of those old patterns that were keeping you stuck. So, the key insight here is that transformation isn't about fighting or fixing your old self. It's about living into the new version of you in real time, letting your nervous system learn gradually that safety and presence and authenticity are possible. If you need help with any of this is exactly what we do inside of my low-cost monthly membership, the Inner Circle. This space is designed specifically to help you learn how to build self-trust and self-safety from within. If you want to learn more, the link will be in the description. If there is one thing that you take away from this video, let it be this. Your sense of self, your sense of identity, it is not fixed. It is largely an adaptation written by your body and your nervous system and shaped by trauma that you might not even remember. And the hidden cost of this adaptation, while it might have been the very thing to keep you alive, it is also limiting you. It is tricking you to believe that your survival adaptations are your identity. But the good news is that the same system that learned to protect you can be the same one to train yourself into safety and trust and authenticity. Your choice isn't just what you do, it's who you decide to embody. If any of this resonated with you, make sure you hit like, subscribe, follow, turn on all of the notifications so you never miss a video about understanding trauma, rewiring your nervous system, and stepping fully into who you were meant to be. I'll see you in the next video.